Okay, welcome everyone. It is 2 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. So thank you everyone for joining this month's edition of Equidox Webinar Wednesdays. Today we're going to be just doing a walkthrough and demonstration of our PDF remediation software called, of course, Equidox. And just so everyone is aware, if you have any follow-up questions, you can place your questions in the chat, and Tammy, our marketing director, will do her best to answer those as they come in. But if you have any additional questions, or you would like to contact us for more information, or perhaps see a more personalized demo for how Equidox would fit into your organization's specific workflows and the types of documents that you need to work on, please feel free to reach out to us at equidoxsales@equidox.co, or you can visit our website at equidox.co. So there's plenty of ways to get in touch with us through those different through our website. So let's get started. Just a brief sort of overview of Equidox. So we offer a best-in-class PDF remediation software. We also offer remediation services as well. So for organizations that don't necessarily want to, or have the bandwidth rather, to remediate documents in-house, you can chat with us about outsourcing that work, and we can return accessible documents to you. We also offer a couple of different automated high-volume PDF solutions. So depending on the way that you're creating documents, perhaps in a repetitive way, you might be producing, let's say, statements or templatized documents at a huge volume. We can also customize a solution for you. So please feel free to reach out and talk to us about those offerings as well. That will be a little bit outside of the scope of this actual demonstration today. Our mission here at Equidox is to enable PDF accessibility through intelligent, automated solutions. This is just a quick sampling of some of our customers, so I'm just going to let this slide kind of play through. We work with organizations of all sizes and in many different verticals. And I'm actually now going to just jump into a demonstration of the application. So I know that the people here on this call today have perhaps never seen a demo. Maybe you've been to our website and seen like some pre-recorded videos. If so, that's great. But I just want to make sure that we give everyone a sort of a well-rounded walkthrough of how the application works and how this kind of applies to PDF accessibility and kind of addressing the accessibility challenges that your organization might be facing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over into the Equidox application. So what I first always mention about Equidox is that this is a web-based application, and I am operating directly in my browser. So while I'm in my browser here, just a couple of things to mention. You don't have to install a specific license of this software on one given machine. So this is a software as a service, and we work with a concurrent user licensing model. So this makes it very flexible to deploy Equidox to a number of different users, because you don't have to dedicate a single license to a single user and a single computer. So you can be working from anywhere, and you can have many different people that have access. It's all just about how many people are using the tool at any given moment. So as soon as someone logs out, that seat in the application becomes available for other users. We understand that not everyone has the job responsibility to sit there and remediate documents for 40 hours a week. You might have some power users in an organization that are doing sort of a high level or high volume remediation, and they are logged in and using it for long durations of time. But you probably are more likely to have people that just need to remediate a couple of documents here and there. Once they log in, they can work on those documents, and then they log out. Those seats are available for other users. So keep in mind that concurrent user licensing model. Another nice advantage of being a web-based application is the fact that you can have multiple people working on projects. You can even have multiple people working on the same document simultaneously. So in many cases, you might have longer documents. I think of like annual reports, for example, where it could be a 200-300 page document with a very tight deadline, and the document needs to be posted publicly by a certain time. Well, if you don't have the bandwidth for one user to dedicate the amount of time to work through all 200 or 300 pages of that document, you can share that document with other users. And perhaps someone is taking the first 50 pages, someone takes 51 through 100. You can kind of work together as a team and get through that document in a shorter amount of time in a more efficient way. Now, what I'm going to do to get started is I'm going to actually import a document that we'll use for the demo today. The documents that you're seeing here, these have just been loaded in for various demos and presentations that I do over the previous days and weeks. So what I'm going to do to get started is just go to the second tab on the left-hand side, and that will bring me to the import screen. From this import screen, I can either upload documents directly from my hard drive. I can also copy and paste the document's URL as well. So this would be helpful if you've done like a website audit where you've got a big spreadsheet or a CSV file with all of the various PDFs that are scattered across your website. If that's the case, you can copy and paste those PDF URLs into this field, and Equidox can go and retrieve those documents for you. You don't have to personally visit all of those individual web pages and download potentially hundreds of individual PDFs. That in itself could be like a full day project. So we'll use the upload feature. So if I just go to this tab here, I'm going to open up the folder on my hard drive here, and I'm just going to grab this document and do a drag and drop into this gray area. Now, once I do that, I'll quickly see this green check mark indicating that that document has been uploaded. And once it's uploaded, this blue import button appears. So pressing this blue import button is going to kick off an automated process where Equidox will evaluate the file for things like existing tag structure. So if you're not familiar, PDF tags are what are used to organize the content and give structure to the document so that someone using assistive technology can navigate and freely access all of the information the same way that a sighted user would by just reading the page on the screen, or if it's printed out and they're looking at it like in paper format, the way that they would visually read it. So document tags are very, very important for PDF accessibility. So if the document were previously tagged, that could be good tag structure, it could be bad tag structure, or somewhere in between. You can use Equidox to make some adjustments to those existing tags, but in many cases, the document won't be tagged. So if the document was never tagged at any point in its life cycle, during that import process, Equidox is running its auto detection. So it's automatically picking up all of the encoded text, images, hyperlinks, fillable form fields, different elements that can make up the PDF document are going to be detected. And then it's the job of the remediator to just kind of go into that document and clean some things up, setting a reading order, setting heading structure, making sure that things like tables and lists are properly structured. Different elements require some different things, and we're going to walk through all of that once we get into the document. Now, if I go back to the document list, this is the document that I just imported. So clicking on it will then isolate just this document for me. I'm looking now at the document detail page. Here's where I could share this document. So if I wanted to work on this with another user, I could share this with those users, and they would be able to contribute to this document. Now, down below, I will see some basic properties of the document. So for example, the document title, which is already provided in this case. You can also set the language attribute. So this is important if you're working on documents that are in different languages. The default setting is English, which will indicate to the screen reader to read from an English library of words. Otherwise, if you have, let's say, a French document, you leave the default English language attribute, then you would have an English screen reader mispronouncing a bunch of French words, which will sound very silly to a native French speaker. So always thinking about the language attribute if you're dealing with documents in different languages. Now, what I'm going to do is just click here on the thumbnail for page 1. And when I do, I'm just now isolating the first page. So this is a 2-page document. And what I see on this page are these yellow boxes. So these yellow boxes that are covering up the content, these are what we refer to as reading zones. So these reading zones that we see here are really the same thing as tags. We just have a different way of calling them. We call them reading zones. When we export the document, they are going to become PDF tags. So we're going to just kind of adjust these reading zones to make sure that we are organizing and capturing all of the content in an appropriate way. Now, just from my experience of using the tool, I can tell right away that I have too many of these reading zones. So the detection level that Equidox has automatically assigned to this page is just too granular. So each one of these lines of text is being detected as its own individual paragraph, which is really kind of inappropriate for this page. So what I'm going to do to get started is go to the Page tab over on the left-hand side and use this tool called the Zone Detector. Now, when I use this zone detector, you'll see how the size and location and shape of these zones starts to change. So you're just really looking for that optimal starting point, the one that is going to give you the least amount of work to do on any given page. So a setting like this seems to be pretty appropriate for this page. And from here, I can start making some more nuanced adjustments. But before going any further and making any further adjustments, I want to point out another really important feature of Equidox, and that is this button right here, which looks kind of like a computer monitor. When you press this button, it will open up a separate tab in your browser, and this browser preview page gives you just an understanding of what kind of structure you have built on that particular PDF page. So this is a way of kind of checking your work as you go through a document. You're looking at this HTML page to identify your headings, to look for reading order, to make sure that you have a list properly structured. Things like that can be adjusted when you're on the PDF editor. So this is a way of kind of checking your work and validating that you've actually done the appropriate things on that particular page. So I still have some work to do to this page. So I'm going to go back to the PDF editor. And the first thing that I like to address when I'm thinking about PDF remediation is heading structure. Now, heading structure is critical from a navigation standpoint. So if you've never done PDF remediation before, if you've never seen how screen readers worked, heading structure allows a screen reader user to navigate beyond specific sections of information. So an easy way to kind of understand that is to think of like a textbook where the title of the textbook on the cover page would be your heading level 1. The individual chapters, the titles of those individual chapters would be heading level 2s. And then you kind of have those subheadings and subheadings within those individual chapters. So if a user was instructed to open up to chapter 14, they can use the heading structure to skip over the first 13 chapters of that textbook. So it's a way to kind of navigate the document. You're building an outline of all of the information so that users can navigate to the specific section of information that they're looking for. So in this case here, my main title of this document, PDF sample document, this is going to be my heading level 1. This is pretty obvious, is that it's on the first page. It's big bold font at the very top of the page. What I'm going to do to set this as a heading is simply tap 1 on my keyboard. When I tap 1 on my keyboard, that zone will change from a text zone to an H1 zone. You can also use this drop-down menu to change the zone type, but I prefer to use the keyboard shortcuts. So keyboard shortcuts are a really important part of this because they just help you be more efficient as you're working through a document. There is a full menu of keyboard shortcuts that you can access in the right-hand corner. This will pull up all of our different options that you have. They become second nature after a while, and it speaks more to the accessibility of the application itself. But as a mouse user, you can still use the keyboard shortcuts to be a little bit more efficient. This is a subheading of this heading level 1. So I'm going to call this a heading level 2. Right now, it's just by the default text zone, but we want to set it to an H2. So I'm just going to tap 2 on my keyboard. This is going to be a subheading of this H2. So I'm going to call this an H3. This basic list will be an H3, and the nested list will also be an H3. Now, just to show you how that updates the HTML preview page, if I return to the preview, if I just refresh it, we'll instantly see the increase in the font size for these different elements that I've set headings for. So you can see that quick change comes to life over here in your HTML preview. Now, the text zones that are correlated with these individual headings, they're fine. I don't have to do anything to them. They are just by default the text zones. So these are going to be read as normal paragraphs. I don't have to adjust them at all. However, when I get down here a little bit further down the page, I have a couple of lists. So this is just a standard list here. You can see we have these bullet points delineating the 5 distinct list items that make up this list. Now, right now, it's by default just a text zone because there was no tag structure to indicate that this is in fact a list. So we need to set it as a list as the remediator. So what I'm going to do is just tap L on my keyboard, or again, you can change the zone type to a list in this drop-down menu. And once you do that, there is this list detection slider tool that will appear. If you move this slider from left to right, you'll see how those list items are instantly detected. So your single zone has now become a single zone with 5 sections in it, indicating where those list items are located. Now, if I go back to the preview after making that change, Instead of these 5 days of the week just being read as like a strange run-on sentence, they are now going to be this is now going to be tagged as a list with 5 distinct items. The same can be said for this element over here, which is a nested list. Now, this is more complex because you have lists that are nested inside of list items. So when remediating this manually, if you're having to set up this type of tag structure manually, this is a very time-consuming process. You have to identify the individual list labels, the individual list bodies, join them together with list item tags, nesting that all appropriately within the different list items that make up the larger list. It's a very tedious, very time-consuming process, and there's a lot of room for error. So if you're not confident and know exactly what you're doing, you would be wrestling with a list like this for a very long time. But with Equidox, we have artificial intelligence that is powering our list detection tool. So we have a way of automating this. Again, all I have to do is hit L on my keyboard and come over here to the list detection slider and bump this over a little bit further. This will trigger the computer vision and machine learning. And almost instantly, I have created this list structure where I have my 2 main list items, but then inside of that list item, I have another sub list. And in that sub list, I have another list created. So you can see how this structure was built pretty much instantly. And if you look at your HTML preview, we will see nested list tag structure here that exactly matches the structure from the PDF page. Now, there's a couple of other things to address on this page, and that's these images. So images, again, if you're not familiar with how screen readers work, an image will just be read as image through a screen reader unless it is given in alt text. So a blind user who is navigating the document with a screen reader, they don't know what these images are or what they represent. Is this a bar chart with critical data? Is it a picture of like a landscape picture of a mountain? They have no idea what this is without some sort of alternate description written for it. So what you would do is come over here into this alt text field and type in a description. So in this case, I would just type in Equidox logo. Other images in documents, they can be more decorative in nature. So for example, this is just a sort of silhouette view of a city landscape. So this is really more of just like considered like a decorative element. This is not a document about a specific city. This is not a document about sort of skyscrapers or anything like that. So there's really no alt text that I could apply to this image. It's going to make this page more understandable to a user who visually can't see it. So another concept is artifacting elements in documents. So if I want to artifact or mark this image as decorative, I can simply hit backspace on my keyboard. When I do that, I'll see that it's actually gone from the HTML preview. It's no longer being included as part of the tagged reading order. A screen reader will just pass over that because that is purely just a visual element that's there for the visual aesthetics of the document. Now down here, I have an image of this cute dog with a kind of like putting its paws up on the Equidox logo. So again, just to reiterate, if you wanted to type in a description, maybe you type in, black and white dog behind the Equidox logo. So these are just little things that you can add in to make sure that the screen reader user is aware of what these images are representing in the context of the document. Now, the last thing on this page is I have a bit of a reading order issue. If you look here at the preview, what we'll see is that my nested list heading level 2 is directly followed by this image of the dog. And then finally, beyond that, I have this nested list. So the reading order is by default set up by Equidox based on a left to right, top to bottom reading order. And the reading order is represented in the upper right-hand corner of these zones. So I have reading zone 10, then over here to 11, and the nested list is 12. Now there's multiple ways that I could address this. Perhaps I want the image of the dog to be read at the very end of the page. I could change that order over here in the order field. I could also just adjust this zone here, which is currently reading zone 12. I can actually use the decimal system to reorder this. So I want this to be read before, after zone 10, but before 11. Well, right now it's reading zone 12. So I can just make it 10.12. And if I go back to the preview, you'll you'll see that now the nested list is read directly after the appropriate heading level 3, and then the dog is read directly, the dog image is read after that. Now that's one way of adjusting the reading order. You also have the ability to reorder the full page. So you have different options as well. So you can reorder it top to bottom, left to right, which is just the default setting. You can also choose 2, 3, or 4 columns, depending on the layout of the page. You might have articles, for example, that require a multi-column layout. You can choose that appropriate setting depending on the page that you're working on. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to jump to the next page. The next page has some different elements. So just a refresher, I'm going to set these as H3s. So I'm just tapping 3 on my keyboard to set my headings. But if you notice here on this page, we have some tables. So tables are another one of those elements that are very tedious and time consuming to deal with. Making sure that they are structured properly and doing this manually, it just takes a lot of experience, a lot of technical know-how. And even if you are very confident in what you're doing, it still is a very time consuming process. But table remediation is absolutely critical. If you look at the preview for how this table would currently be read, it would read all of these different elements in just this very strange reading order where none of this is structured properly. There's really no way to determine how this page or how this table should be read. If they were to navigate individual cells, they wouldn't know which row or column they're correlated with. So this would render the entire table and really this entire page would be left useless. So we want to make sure that we're tagging this appropriately. So I'm just going to draw a single zone around the entire table itself. And when I do that, I can then hit T on my keyboard, or I can hit this drop-down menu and select table to change the zone type. Now, when I do that, this blue table editor button will appear. And the blue table editor button, when I press it, it will just isolate this portion of the page for myself. Now, right away, I see these green grid lines where it's just kind of Equidox's initial guess at the table structure. It didn't do a very good job, just like right out of the gate, but we have the table detection sliders. So similar to the list detector, these are using artificial intelligence where if I just move these sliders around, I'm triggering the computer vision and machine learning to identify the structure of this table. So now you'll notice that those green grid lines perfectly align with the table. So all of these cells are identified. And if we just revisit the preview page, what we'll see is that I've actually built a very nice looking clean HTML table. By default, the bold font indicated here in the top row in the far left column, these are your column and row headers, whereas the standard font in the middle of the table, these are going to be tagged as table data. So that's just the assumption of Equidox is that your table has a single column header at the top and a row header in the far left column. In this case here, you can make the argument that you really only need column headers. So what we can do is just hit the row header. We can change this from 1 to 0. Our table summary will automatically update with that information. And if I go back to the preview, we will see that I only have bold font in my top row now, indicating that those will be tagged as headers, whereas the standard font will all be tagged as table data. Now, once I save that and close out of the table editor, you'll see that I'm just left with a single table zone. All of those individual text zones have now been overridden. Now, this is a slightly more complicated table. So I'm going to, again, do the same thing as I did before. I'm going to draw a zone around everything. I'm going to hit T on my keyboard, which will change it to a table. And then I'm going to open up the table editor. Now, the reason that this is a more complex table is the fact that this table has multiple column headers. And the column headers actually span across multiple columns. So the year 2022 and 2023, you can see that they are spanning now across these different columns for the individual quarters. It's the same process, a similar process as before, where again, I'm just going to use my table detectors to kind of slide these around until I find the appropriate setting. But if I look at my preview now, I'm going to see some blank cells like on either side of the individual year. And also I need to make sure that I have column headers set for my individual quarters. So in order to span these cells, all I'm going to do is select this cell here, which is the first cell of the span, hold Shift on my keyboard, and then select the other cell that I want to span to. I can then press the span button or just S on my keyboard. Same thing here. I'll just hold Shift and press S. And then again, I have 2 column headers. So I want to make sure that I set that appropriately. So I just hit the up arrow to indicate that I have column headers. And then if I go back to my preview, what we'll see is that we have the years are spanning across the 4 corresponding quarters. And if a user finds himself in this particular cell, they know that it's the sales row, they know it's the year 2022, and it's the 3rd quarter of 2022. So again, I'll save that table and close out of it, and I'm just left with the single table zone. Now down here at the bottom, we have a different element type, and that's form fields. So this is another thing that we're often asked about. Now, fillable forms are definitely a more complicated type of document. In Equidox, it's relatively simple though in order to remediate them, because what we do is we give you the option to add the tooltip for the individual fields right here on the interface. So the big thing with form fields is making sure that there's an accurate tooltip so that a user knows exactly what type of data they should be entering in any given field. So this particular form field is asking for the date. So an appropriate form field to type, or an appropriate tooltip to type into this form field would be something like enter the date that this form was filled out. If it's a different date that you're asking for, maybe a birth date, for example, you want to be explicit in your instructions. To take it a step further, you might even elect to give them the format that you want the date. So do you want it in the format of month, day, and then 4 digits for the year? Do you want just 2 digits for the year? Do you want the days first, then the month? If it's important as to how your office receives that data, you always want to be explicit in the format that you want them to be entering it in, because someone might be liable to just type out April 26th, 2023, and then your office might not have a way of entering in that data in an automated way. So you just always want to be aware of exactly what format they're entering the information. Another example here would be if a field is asking for a name, don't just have the tooltip of name. You always want to be explicit in typing in something like enter the first name of applicant. Otherwise, they might give you their last name first or their mother's maiden name or something along those lines. You always want to be very explicit in your instructions. So you would just work through these tooltips and making sure that you're typing in the appropriate tooltips to handle these fields. Enter date of birth, select yes, select no. So I'm just trying to fill these in pretty quickly so that we can do an export and get a clean report from this document. Now, down below here, we do have one other element that I always wanted to mention. Just in the interest of time here, I'm speeding up a little bit, but this hyperlink was embedded in the source file. So there's actually nothing I need to do to this. This is a link directly to our website. And you'll notice that this is already set as a link zone. So Equidox recognized this on import. This link is nested inside of this text zone, but it has the appropriate anchor point. So it's going to take the user to our website, which is www.equidox.co. So there's really nothing that I need to do to this. The only thing that I really want to make sure that I'm doing is just reordering the page to make sure that this will be read in a logical top to bottom way. You can always take one last look at your preview just to kind of get a sense of the reading order of the page. So this looks pretty good. You can see down here we have the active link, which will actually take the user to our website. Now, in order to finish off the full process, I just want to close out of the document, and I want to go to the Output tab. Now, the Output tab will allow me to export this document to different formats. So I can choose HTML, PDF, or EPUB. I'm going to choose PDF in this case. And if I just hit Generate PDF, Equidox will produce a brand new document for me. So it's going to open up this new document in my browser. And what I'll see in this new document is that nothing has visually changed. It's still going to be the same document that I started with. But this document will be tagged, and it'll be and you can see like these fields here, these are now added. We can see that this document doesn't change in any way. But if I were to open this document up in Adobe Acrobat, and if I look over here at the tag structure, what I'll see is that all of this content is now tagged and can all be navigated by a screen reader user. So even the image of that silhouette was artifacted, so you can see that it just skips past it. I get down here to the nested list, then I move over to my image of the dog, then I have my my headings and my tables. All of this content is tagged appropriately, other than a couple of minor reading order things that I would want to change. This document is good to go, and it's ready to be distributed. You can also always, if I save the document, save it real quick. If I save the document, I can also run the accessibility checker just to make sure. This is what many organizations do. They want to run it through the checker just to make sure that everything is, up to standards. Now, if you look at an accessibility checker, if you've never done this before, you will always see these two warnings. These are not errors. These are just Acrobat telling you that it has no mechanism to tell you what the reading order should be, and it doesn't have the ability to check for color contrast. So these two warnings will come out with every document you ever run through it, but all of the other criteria that it's checking for are clean. So those are the only two issues that it found. And again, they're not really issues. They are merely just warnings. Now, if I go back to the original, just so that you're aware, the original document that I started working on was completely untagged. So there would be no structure to this document. A screen reader would have a very difficult time working with it. So just so you can see the difference here, completely untagged versus perfect tag structure in this version that we've exported. Now I realize that we're a minute over time, so I just want to reiterate that if you need to get in touch with us, we can be reached at equidoxsales@equidox.co. Our website again is www.equidox.co. We also are very active on social media, so follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter. We have a YouTube page, a Facebook account. So please feel free to interact with us there on those platforms. And like I said at the beginning, this was a very fast and furious demo. So if you have any follow-up questions that Tammy wasn't able to answer in the chat, please let us know. We can tailor and kind of make a specific demo for your organization using your documents. So please let us know if you have any questions or would like to kind of engage further and learn more about Equidox, because really we've just scratched the surface today. So thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you back at another edition of Equidox Webinar Wednesdays.
For more information about how Equidox Software Company can help you with PDF accessibility, email us at equidoxsales@equidox.co or give us a call at 216-529-3030 or visit our website at www.equidox.co.